No, you no.
No.
Yes.
No, please don't.
No.
Elton John just did something that nobody in the music industry thought was possible. The man who's built his entire career on flamboyant performances and carefully managed public relationships just threw down the gauntlet in the most unexpected way imaginable. And when I tell you what he said about Roger Waters, you're going to understand why the entire rock world is scrambling to pick sides in a war that's been brewing for decades. Yesterday morning, Elton's official statement hit the internet like a nuclear bomb, not some cryptic Instagram post or diplomatic press release. This was a full-scale, no-holds-barred defense of Ozzy Osbourne that was so personal, so emotionally charged, that major news outlets had to verify it was actually from Sir Elton John himself. Here's exactly what Elton said, and I'm quoting directly. Roger Waters has spent his career building walls between himself and basic human decency. Ozzy Osbourne spent his career tearing down walls between music and pure emotion. Anyone attacking Ozzy's legacy while his family grieves doesn't understand what rock and roll is really about, and they sure as hell don't understand friendship. But that was just the opening salvo. Elton kept going, and every word was more devastating than the last. I've watched Roger hide behind artistic pretension while real artists like Ozzy connected with millions of people through genuine vulnerability. There's a difference between being deep and being cruel, and Roger has never learned that difference. Now here's what makes this statement absolutely earth-shattering. Elton John doesn't do public feuds. This is the man who's maintained friendships across every possible divide in the music industry. He's worked with everyone from Eminem to Ed Sheeran, stayed diplomatic through decades of industry drama, and built his reputation on being the ultimate peacemaker who brings people together rather than tearing them apart. So for Elton to come out swinging at Roger Waters like this isn't just surprising. It reveals something that's been hidden from the public for over 30 years. Because what nobody knew until yesterday is that Elton John and Ozzy Osbourne have been secret best friends since 1987, and their friendship is built on something so personal, so deeply meaningful, that watching Waters attack Ozzy's legacy triggered something primal in Elton that the world has never seen before. The story of their friendship started during Elton's darkest period, when his cocaine addiction had nearly destroyed his career and his personal life was falling apart. This was 1987, and Elton was struggling with demons that were threatening to kill him. That's when Ozzy Osbourne, of all people, became the voice of reason that probably saved Elton's life. Here's what their mutual friends have been quietly sharing since Elton's statement went public. Ozzy didn't just support Elton through recovery. He literally moved into Elton's house for 3 months in 1987 and became his unofficial sobriety coach, cooking meals, staying up all night when Elton couldn't sleep, and providing the kind of unconditional friendship that Elton had never experienced from another rock star. The beautiful irony is that everyone expected their friendship to be about wild partying and rock star excess. Instead, it was about two men helping each other become better human beings. Ozzy helped Elton get clean, and Elton helped Ozzy navigate the complexities of fame without losing his essential humanity. They became each other's emotional anchors in an industry that's notorious for destroying authentic relationships. Their friendship was so genuine, so far removed from typical music industry networking, that they deliberately kept it private for decades. While other celebrities were staging public friendships for publicity, Elton and Ozzy were having weekly phone calls, attending each other's family gatherings, and providing emotional support through every major life crisis without anyone in the media knowing about it. Industry insiders are now revealing details that show just how deep their bond really was. When Elton was knighted in 1998, Ozzy was the first person he called with the news. When Ozzy's father died in 2002, Elton flew to Birmingham immediately and spent 3 days with the Osbourne family, helping them through their grief. These weren't publicity stunts. These were the actions of two men who genuinely loved each other like brothers. The most telling detail about their friendship is what happened during Ozzy's Parkinson's diagnosis. Sources close to both men say that Elton has been Ozzy's primary emotional support system throughout his illness, calling him every single day and flying to Los Angeles monthly just to spend time together. This wasn't about career collaboration or mutual benefit. This was about one friend refusing to let another face his darkest moments alone. So when Roger Waters decided to attack Ozzy's legacy while Ozzy's dealing with a degenerative disease, he wasn't just attacking a fellow musician. He was attacking Elton John's closest friend, his recovery partner, his chosen family member. And that's when the diplomatic, peacemaking Elton John disappeared forever. Because what Waters doesn't understand, and what the music industry is just now realizing, is that Elton's defense of Ozzy isn't really about defending another artist's reputation. It's about protecting someone he loves from a bully who's built his entire career on tearing down everything that's beautiful about rock and roll's capacity for genuine human connection. And that's just the beginning of why Elton's been planning this response for years. Here's what Elton John has been quietly documenting for over 2 decades, and why his explosive defense of Ozzy was really about exposing the most toxic pattern in rock music history. Because Roger Waters doesn't just attack other musicians randomly. He has a calculated system for targeting rock legends at their most vulnerable moments. And what Elton discovered about this pattern is so disturbing that it explains why the entire industry has been afraid to call Waters out until now. The pattern started in 1994 when Kurt Cobain died, and Waters immediately began making public statements about how Cobain's death proved that grunge musicians lacked the intellectual depth to handle fame. While families were grieving and fans were mourning, Waters was using a tragedy to position himself as morally superior to a dead 27-year-old. That should have been everyone's first warning about who Roger Waters really was underneath the artistic pretension. But it got worse. When Johnny Cash was dying in 2003, struggling with diabetes and barely able to perform, Waters gave an interview where he dismissed Cash's late career resurgence as nostalgia marketing for people too unsophisticated to appreciate real artistry. Cash died 6 months later, and Waters never acknowledged how cruel it was to attack a dying legend's final creative period. The pattern became undeniable when David Bowie got sick. Waters spent 2015 making comments about how Bowie's later albums showed he was creatively exhausted and desperately trying to stay relevant. Bowie was literally fighting cancer while creating some of his most innovative work, and Waters was using music magazines to suggest that Bowie's illness was affecting his artistic judgment. Bowie died in January 2016, and Waters' response was to double down on his criticism. Here's what industry insiders have been whispering about for years, but were too scared to say publicly. Waters has a psychological need to tear down other artists' legacies while they're too vulnerable to fight back. He waits until musicians are dealing with illness, addiction, family tragedy, or death, then positions himself as the voice of artistic integrity while they're unable to defend themselves. The most disgusting example happened with Tom Petty. While Petty was struggling with his final tour, dealing with a broken hip and obvious health problems, Waters made public comments about how Petty's music was simplistic compared to more sophisticated conceptual work. Petty died 3 months later from an accidental overdose of pain medication he was taking for that broken hip. Waters had literally mocked a man's artistic legacy, while that man was dying from the physical pain of trying to keep performing for his fans. But here's the part that's really disturbing. Waters doesn't attack these artists because he disagrees with their music. He attacks them because their authentic connection with audiences threatens everything his career is built on. Waters has spent 50 years convincing people that art has to be pretentious and difficult to be meaningful. But artists like Ozzy, Bowie, Cash, and Petty proved that you can create profound art that's also emotionally accessible. Every time a beloved musician demonstrates that connection with audiences is more important than intellectual posturing, it exposes Waters' entire artistic philosophy as elitist garbage. So he systematically attacks them when they're too weak to fight back, hoping to convince people that their popularity means they're less serious as artists. The industry has known about this pattern for decades, but nobody wanted to risk their career by calling out Roger Waters publicly. He's got enough critical respect and Pink Floyd legacy protection that attacking him seemed like professional suicide. Plus, Waters is smart about his targets. He goes after musicians who are too sick, too old, or too dead to launch a counterattack that could damage his reputation. That's what makes Elton's decision to finally speak out so incredibly brave. Elton is one of the few artists with enough industry power and public respect to challenge Waters without destroying his own career. But more importantly, Elton has been keeping detailed records of Waters' pattern of attacking vulnerable musicians, waiting for the perfect moment to expose what he's really been doing. Here's what sources close to Elton are revealing about his decision-making process. Elton has been collecting Waters' quotes about sick and dying musicians for over 20 years, documenting every cruel comment, every calculated attack on grieving families, every attempt to use other people's tragedies for his own moral positioning. This wasn't emotional impulse. This was strategic warfare from someone who's been planning this response for decades. The reason Elton chose Ozzy's situation as his line in the sand is particularly calculated. Ozzy is still alive, still able to appreciate being defended, still surrounded by family who can benefit from Elton's support. Waters made the mistake of attacking someone who has a powerful friend willing to fight back, instead of waiting until Ozzy was too sick or too isolated to have anyone defend him. But here's the part that's got the music industry absolutely terrified. Elton's attack on Waters wasn't just about defending Ozzy. It was about finally calling out a pattern of behavior that's been poisoning rock music culture for 30 years. And now that Elton has broken the silence, other artists are realizing they don't have to be afraid of Roger Waters anymore. Because if there's one thing bullies can't handle, it's someone finally fighting back with bigger fists and better documentation. And Elton John just proved that Waters' decades of attacking vulnerable musicians was really cowardice disguised as artistic integrity. The industry earthquake that's about to hit is going to make Waters' attack on Ozzy look like the smallest part of a much bigger reckoning. What happened in the first 24 hours after Elton's statement broke the internet was unlike anything the music industry has ever seen. This wasn't just celebrities choosing sides in a Twitter feud. This was a complete realignment of power in rock music, with legendary artists who have stayed silent about industry bullying for decades suddenly finding their voices and declaring war on Roger Waters' toxic behavior. The avalanche started with Mick Jagger, who posted something on Instagram that made everyone's jaw drop. No diplomatic language, no careful PR messaging, just a simple black and white photo of him with Ozzy and Elton from a 1975 party with the caption, "Some people build bridges, some people build walls. I know which side I'm on." Within minutes, that post had 500,000 likes and thousands of comments from fans who finally understood that this was about something much bigger than defending one musician. But Jagger's post was nothing compared to what Keith Richards did next. Richards, who never does interviews anymore unless it's about a new Stones album, called into BBC Radio and said something that sent shockwaves through every record label in London. Roger Waters has been dining out on other people's misery for 30 years, and we all stayed quiet because we thought it was classier to take the high road. Turns out the high road just gave him more people to look down on. That quote from Keith Richards broke every remaining barrier in the industry. Because if the Rolling Stones were willing to publicly call out Waters, then nobody had to pretend to respect his artistic integrity anymore. The floodgates opened completely when Paul Stanley from Kiss released a statement that was so brutally honest it made Elton's original defense look diplomatic. Stanley said, "Roger Waters represents everything that's wrong with rock music elitism. While he's been lecturing everyone about artistic purity, real artists like Ozzy have been connecting with fans and changing lives. There's nothing pure about attacking sick people for sport." Within 6 hours, Stanley's statement was being shared by everyone from Slash to Alice Cooper to Steven Tyler. The entire classic rock establishment was rallying behind Elton's position, and the message was clear. The era of tolerating Waters' behavior was officially over. But here's where it gets really interesting. The corporate response was faster and more decisive than anyone expected. Waters' current tour sponsors didn't just quietly distance themselves. They issued public statements explaining why they were terminating their deals. Live Nation released a statement saying they're committed to supporting artists who demonstrate respect for their peers and the music community. AEG Entertainment followed with their own statement about fostering positive industry relationships. These weren't just business decisions. These were moral positions that corporate entertainment giants felt safe taking because Elton's evidence about Waters' pattern was so overwhelming that supporting Waters would have been a public relations nightmare. The social media war that erupted was unlike anything the music world has ever seen. Pink Floyd fans were split down the middle, with longtime supporters creating Team Elton and Defend Ozzy hashtags that were trending globally within hours. But what really shocked everyone was how one-sided the celebrity support became. For every major artist supporting Waters, there were 20 supporting Elton's position. The most devastating blow to Waters came from an unexpected source. his own former bandmates. David Gilmour, who spent decades diplomatically avoiding Waters-related controversies, posted a statement that essentially ended any possibility of Pink Floyd reconciliation forever. Gilmour said, "Roger's behavior toward Ozzy and others represents a side of him that I've watched with sadness for years. Elton John is showing the courage that the rest of us should have shown decades ago." That statement from Gilmour was the moment everyone realized this wasn't just about defending Ozzy anymore. This was about finally holding Waters accountable for decades of toxic behavior that his own bandmates had been too diplomatic to address publicly. But the real industry earthquake happened when the younger generation of rock stars started weighing in. Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters, who usually stays out of industry drama, posted a long Instagram statement about how Ozzy influenced his entire career and how Waters' attack represented everything that's poisonous about rock music gatekeeping. Within hours, that post was being shared by everyone from Billie Eilish to Jack White. The generational divide became crystal clear. Older artists were supporting Elton because they'd witnessed Waters' behavior firsthand. Younger artists were supporting Elton because they understood that this was really about protecting the accessibility and emotional honesty that makes rock music powerful. Record executives started privately sharing their own Roger Waters horror stories. One major label president, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that Waters had spent years badmouthing other artists in private meetings while positioning himself as the voice of artistic integrity. Roger would trash everyone from Bruce Springsteen to U2 in boardrooms, then act like he was above industry politics in public. Elton finally gave us permission to acknowledge what we've all known for years. The most shocking revelation came when streaming platforms started releasing data showing that Ozzy's catalog was experiencing a massive surge in plays, while Waters' solo material was actually declining. Fans weren't just supporting Elton's position rhetorically. They were voting with their listening habits, and the message was clear: authenticity trumps pretension every single time. Industry insiders are now predicting that this moment will be remembered as the day rock music finally rejected elitist gatekeeping in favor of emotional connection. Waters' decades-long campaign to position himself as intellectually superior to more popular artists has backfired completely, revealing him as exactly the kind of bitter, jealous musician that rock and roll was created to rebel against. But here's what nobody saw coming. Elton's defense of Ozzy wasn't the end of his campaign against industry toxicity. It was just the opening move in something much bigger. Here's what nobody saw coming, and why Elton John's defense of Ozzy was really the most brilliant strategic move in rock music history. Because this wasn't just about protecting one friend or settling one score. Elton has been orchestrating a complete transformation of how the music industry treats its legends, and what he's accomplished in the past week is going to protect vulnerable artists for generations. The master plan started 18 months ago when Elton began his farewell tour. Sources close to his management team are now revealing that Elton made a conscious decision to use his final years in the spotlight to clean house in the music industry. He knew that his legendary status and upcoming retirement gave him unique power to call out toxic behavior without worrying about career consequences. But he needed the perfect target and the perfect moment to make his stand. Roger Waters attacking Ozzy gave Elton exactly what he'd been waiting for. A clear moral position where supporting him meant supporting human decency, and opposing him meant defending cruelty towards sick people. Elton turned Waters' attack on Ozzy into a referendum on whether the music industry would continue tolerating bullies who hide behind artistic pretension. But here's the genius of Elton's strategy. By framing his defense around friendship rather than musical disagreements, he made it impossible for anyone to claim this was about artistic differences or professional jealousy. This was about basic human values, which meant that supporting Waters required defending the indefensible. The result is that Elton has essentially created a new industry standard for how legendary artists should be treated. Waters' career-ending humiliation sent a message to every musician in the world. Attacking vulnerable legends will now result in immediate industry exile. The days of using other people's tragedies for moral positioning are officially over. Industry executives are privately calling this the Elton Doctrine, the idea that established artists have a responsibility to protect their vulnerable peers from predators who exploit weakness for personal gain. Major labels are now including respectful industry behavior clauses in new contracts, essentially codifying Elton's moral position into legally binding business practices. But the most brilliant aspect of Elton's strategy is how he's positioned himself as the protector of rock music's authentic spirit. By defending Ozzy's legacy of emotional connection with fans, Elton wasn't just protecting one artist. He was defending the entire tradition of rock music that prioritizes genuine feeling over intellectual posturing. The timing was absolutely perfect because the music industry was already questioning whether critical respectability mattered more than authentic fan connection. Streaming data shows that audiences consistently prefer emotionally honest artists over critically acclaimed but distant performers. Elton's defense of Ozzy crystallized this cultural shift into a clear choice: authenticity or elitism. What's happening now is that every aging rock star understands they have Elton's protection if they face similar attacks. Keith Richards, Steven Tyler, Alice Cooper, all the legends who are entering their vulnerable years. They know that speaking out against industry bullying will be supported rather than punished. Elton has created a protective umbrella that covers the entire classic rock generation. The corporate response proves how successful this strategy has been. Entertainment companies are now competing to show their support for authentic artistic expression and respectful industry relationships. What was once considered naive idealism is now smart business practice, because Elton proved that audiences will punish companies that support cruelty toward beloved artists. But here's what's really revolutionary about what Elton accomplished. He's changed the conversation about what artistic integrity actually means. For decades, Waters and artists like him convinced people that being difficult and pretentious proved artistic seriousness. Elton proved that real artistic integrity means treating your peers with basic human decency, especially when they're vulnerable. The streaming numbers tell the whole story. Since Elton's defense of Ozzy, authentic artists who connect emotionally with audiences are seeing massive increases in plays, while pretentious artists who built careers on intellectual superiority are losing listeners. The market is rewarding authenticity over elitism, exactly what Elton knew would happen. Industry insiders are now predicting that this moment will be studied in music business schools as a masterclass in strategic reputation management. Elton used his own legendary status as a weapon to protect other legends, creating a new paradigm where attacking vulnerable artists is not just morally wrong. The most important long-term impact is what this means for younger artists. Elton has essentially established that the music industry will no longer tolerate the kind of competitive cruelty that previous generations accepted as normal. Future musicians will grow up in an environment where supporting each other is rewarded and tearing each other down is punished. But the real genius of Elton's strategy is that he's positioned himself as the final word on rock music values just as he's preparing to retire. This wasn't just about defending Ozzy or attacking Waters. This was Elton John's final gift to rock music, establishing moral standards that will outlive his own career. The Roger Waters saga is already being remembered as the moment the music industry chose heart over pretension, authenticity over elitism, friendship over intellectual superiority. And it's all because one legendary artist decided that protecting his vulnerable friends was more important than maintaining diplomatic silence. Elton John didn't just defend Ozzy Osbourne. He redefined what it means to be a rock legend, and every artist who comes after him will benefit from the moral standards he established in this moment. Rock history has been permanently rewritten, and it happened because friendship turned out to be more powerful than 50 years of calculated cruelty. This story is exploding by the hour as more industry secrets emerge and other legends choose sides. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell for exclusive updates on which rock stars are speaking out next. Comment below. Do you think Elton's defense will change how the industry treats aging legends forever? The revolution is just getting started.